Jamie?
I actually do have some real questions. The wordsmithing is just, it's like misspelled word corrections and stuff like that to protect the document. But there's some issues that I did want to ask about. On page 9, section 1.7, it talks about the floodplain administrator. The ordinance provides no default if no administrator is appointed. Should there be a default, or is the ordinance in abeyance if at a time there's no one appointed?
I believe there should be a default, and if I remember correctly, under the ordinances that are still in effect, currently in effect, that default is the mayor.
That would be appropriate.
I will make a note to ask that question.
I've got a half dozen questions. Ready? On page 13, the building definitions is very specific about buildings that are primarily above ground. And yet I know of a private residence in Ogden, Utah that is underground. The peak of the roof is at eye level. Now I can't imagine anybody dumb enough to try to put an underground private residence in a floodplain, that people have done sillier things for the sake of a selfie. Does it make sense to change that definition to remove the expectation that it's only an above ground structure?
I would be curious to know what the zoning regulations are in that situation.
And that's a good point, since this document specifically refers to zoning having to, and other ordinances having to be met.
As you were speaking, I will say that I was thinking about the Lincoln and Holland tunnels, the tunnel.
And a lot of other things
Yeah.
that, if anything goes
Yeah.
wrong, they're flooded. On page 42 in section 913.1.3, it's talking about levies, and it specifically states that if for example, a developer were to develop a multiple plat site and the levy was required to protect more than one plat, that it would have to be publicly owned and maintained. Does that section obligate the city to become the owner of such levies, or does it put the city council in a position to arbitrarily cancel any development based on a desire to not own the levy?
Which that is a good question, because the white annexation, the proposed condominium homes that are being proposed for that are intended to be built on a hill or levee.
Oh, they require being lifted to get them out of the floodplain.
Well, no, for the sewer lines to be able to drain.
Uh-huh.
That
Would
is a
you
good
rephrase
question.
or restate your question again, JB?
Does section 913.1.3 obligate the city to own and maintain levies?
Thank you. And can you have anything other than a Chevy?
I love that song.
Should have put my letters in, something like that. Or something like that.
On page 61, section 14.1 states that an investigation may be initiated only by the floodplain administrator or the written request of 3 title holders whose land may be affected. Does that mean no one else can initiate an investigation, including the city council?
The plain reading of the language would indicate yes. I mean,
That's my worry.
Okay.
It seems like the way it was written was very specific and exclusionary. And while I'm sure we don't want every proverbial Tom, Dick, and Harry marching in and demanding investigations in order to stop development that they don't want to develop, I would hate to exclude the presiding authority of the city from the ability to institute an investigation.
You're suggestion would be to include council.
I'd either include the council or to word it more broadly. I think it would be sufficient to just include the council.
Okay.
Page 62, it's the section 14.6. This is the section before the penalty section. Should section 14.6 refer to section 15? Something along the lines of remedies may include administrative action, the penalties identified in section 15 or litigation? Or do we believe that it's sufficiently implied by the way it's worded? I'm just wondering.
Where are the penalties?
The penalties are section 15,
Oh,
the next page.
oh, okay.
And I'm wondering if somebody could see in that a potential loophole to get out of the penalties because they're not specifically stated there.
I just think it states what those penalties are corrective act, or what those penalties could actually be in the way of administrative, legal, or through the court system.
If you feel like it's adequate, I'm content.
Yeah, I think that
They
it
just threw
is.
a blank
Yeah,
in.
that's the way I read it.
Moving into the administrative section, because it's part of the document, I think it
Okay.
is. Okay.
In that case, my last question is, Mayor, would you be willing to investigate the cost of getting an updated floodplain map? Because this document refers to all kinds of boundaries that are not represented on that map at all.
What year was that, Matt?
2000.
Just the other day.
Just the other day.
FEMA's probably rewritten their rules a dozen times since that map was written. That's all I have here, thank you.
Great. So we will, do second reading and public hearing at our next council meeting, and then expect to take action on the proposed ordinance. Okay. All right. The next item on the agenda is the planning board, and I asked that, or I put this on there just to talk about what is and isn't happening with the planning board right now. I understand the board has had some challenges in, hasn't been able to get a quorum, and so hasn't been able to take action, and I believe there's at least one pending conditional use permit.
There are actually two.
Two. And I think Carrie and or Jenny have been getting a series of phone calls from one of those applicants.
Correct, I'm
Because
looking
it's
at
been several weeks in the process. So my question is for those members of council who are also serving on the planning board, is there anything I as mayor or council collectively can do to facilitate?
I feel like maybe there's one member that it might be a good thing for you to contact them to see if there's still interest. They have not shown up for a planning board meeting. Couldn't even tell you this time.
Okay.
Possibly two. I mean, one of your planning board members, Winters in Arizona. So
Okay.
any of the winter months, that person is not present. So that would create an issue there.
Does the planning board operating policies, if you will, or bylaws, if you will, include an opportunity to attend that meeting electronically?
No, it doesn't, but that is definitely, we've had several times where it's been, a very important, meeting. There's been a couple times that I've been out traveling and they didn't have a quorum, and Jenny texted me and I called in so that